In this demo, I want to show you quickly how to use the string format property on a binding to render out a formatted value to the user interface. Our starting point here is the same demo app that we've been using up to this point, and what I'm going to focus on is this age field. If you remember from previous demo, we were applying a converter there that's putting the parentheses there for a negative value. We're going to replace that and do some string formatting. So first off, I'm going to drop into my customer and change my age property to be a floating value, so that we can put some decimal points in there. I'll do that on the member variable and on the property. Then I'm going to drop into the UI and find the age input, and I'm going to replace that with a slightly different text binding. So here we can see we're still binding to the age property, but now we just simply set the string format property, and here we're using one of the predefined string formats, a floating point with 2 decimals. If we go ahead and run now, we can see that that value, which is set to -35, now displays with 2 decimals. If we go and make other mods to it, let's say we set it to 44.444, and we tab out of the field, notice as we tab out of the field, the value is written to the underlying object, and the value becomes 44.44. Now let's go set a breakpoint in the set block and do that again, and we'll say 44.55, tab out, and we can see the value that's being set is the full precision value. But when we run, all we see is the rounded off value applied by string format. So one downside to using these is to realize that what you see on the screen and what the actual underlying value are might be slightly different. But if the way you want to display it to the user is always with 2 decimal places, then that's up to you to manage the actual precision under the covers. Now there's one other gotcha to be aware of with using string format. If we also add the update source trigger equals property change property on our binding, which we saw earlier in the module, and go run our scenario again, now watch what happens as I put in a value. I hit 5, and it immediately string formats because we've got update source trigger equals property change. As soon as the target property changes, which happens on every keystroke, it's going to set the underlying source property. Source property raises a property changed event that forces the binding to rebind and re-render based on the string format. The problem with this is for a rapid input scenario, say that I wanted to highlight this and say 55.55. If I do that quickly, 55.55, look what I end up with. It's because after each keystroke, it's re-rendering, it's putting the decimal place in there for me. So when I get around and type the decimal place, I'm actually adding another decimal place, and I've got an invalid string format now that can't be converted to the underlying type. And that's why we see the red box, which we'll get into more in the validation section. As a result of that, you generally don't want to use update source trigger equals property change in combination with string format, because you'll get this re-rendering as you're typing, which especially with numeric formats does not work out the way you want. But with the normal focus change update source trigger, string format works very nicely for inputting those formatted values and rendering them appropriately.